I have some experience in the accident investigations, so I would give my view of the evidence which is available on the internet. First thing is, it appears from the grab of this video camera footage that the helicopter is heading straight into the middle of the aircraft, whereas it is actually heading for the center of the glow of the light and not the aircraft. Why? Because all the landing lamps are fitted towards the bottom side of the fuselage. So at night the fuselage is higher and the cockpit, where the captain is sitting on the right, is higher than these lights. For example, if you see a glow of lights coming towards you, you can realize that the aircraft is actually much higher than the glow of the lights. So the conclusion is the likely impact is on the lower side of the CRJ and not straight into the aircraft fuselage. Now for the second evidence, we can see in the pictures the right wing is fairly intact except for the flap which is towards the root of the wing. The third evidence is the rotor head pictures, and you can see all the main rotor blades which struck the aircraft are completely shaped. And mind you, the blades have a titanium leading edges and quite strong in the front part of the blades. And also you can note that the rotor head is fairly intact, which means it did not go and hit the CRJ. Why? Because the rotor disc is way forward of the cockpit and the front part of the nose of the aircraft. I would also like you to take a look at the mid-air collisions videos available on the internet. In such collisions, they do not always end up with ball of fire unless the fuel tank is hit. So we conclude from these two evidences that the likely impact is on the left wing fuel tank area, causing instant fireball, and which also means that the pilots had initiated a left bank, and it was quite significant just before the impact that the right wing remained much higher than the helicopter. In another evidence, which is the sectional chart, and then if we plot the position of the helicopter height along the route which has been detected by the ATC radar. And you can see here the greens are those when the aircraft was flying within limits, and the red ones are those where the aircraft exceeded the height limitations. What I conclude from all of this is apparently both the pilots were distracted or found difficult to maintain height. Somehow or the other, they both found it difficult to maintain the height. And there have been a lot of talk about the altimeter setting between the two pilots. But at the end of this incident, you see both the aircraft are indicating 300 feet high altitude at the time of impact, which is physically they were there at that time. So both aircraft altimeters were indicating 300 feet exactly at the time of the impact. A little bit of details on the altimeter. On the right side is the barometric altimeter, which is called Baralt. It works on the prevalent air pressure. It is sluggish to show the reading or changes, and it is less accurate. It has a height hold in Baralt, but when we change the attitude, it crosses the set altitude. So if we had set 500 feet on Baralt, and if we change the attitude, the altimeter will take time to go and correct itself back to the altitude. On the contrary, we have radalt, which works on radar pulses. It's quite accurate, and it gives instant height above the terrain. And if somebody is using the height hold, then it maintains the set height accurately, and we normally use it flying below 500 feet. It also has a setting for low altitude warning. Then another thing we have noted here in the various recordings, that PAT 25 was on UHF channel with the TAR, which is an authorized channel. The CRJ was on VHF channel with the TAR. So they both cannot hear each other directly. This double frequency deprived both the aircraft knowing each other's flight conditions and intentions instantly. And this has been objected by Flying Standards team elsewhere in the world. There has been a talk about the visibility visibility arc or restrictions or limitation on the pilots when they're looking outside. But if you look, this is the area of 40 degrees, which is normal for NVIS 9, which we have been flying. And it is quite close. If you are close, it's quite narrow in angle. But as you move away, you can see it must have covered the approaching aircraft with the landing lamp on. So, and if somebody was doing the proper scanning, then they must have picked up. There is no way such a bright light would have been missed out by in the dark sky by both the pilots. We can also see anti-collision lights flashing till the time of impact from the helicopter. Now, normal procedure for flying NVG is to switch off at least the forward anti-collision light to avoid distracting flashes on the NVG. Now, this must have definitely impaired their vision in front. And let's look at the sectional chart. If you note very carefully, it says no special VFR. And that means there is no civil flight available or allowed in this area at night to be flown visually, except for the military helicopters who are supposed to fly on a particular route under those limitations. But I want to highlight here that the NVG is an aid that does not qualify for VFR or special VFR flight. Technically it remains an IFR flight, essentially and must have been under total control of the ATC, which would have given them vectors to clear the CRJ. Another thing, if the pilots were flying special VFR, flying visually and saying that they were requesting visual separation and they were approved, now they had a responsibility, an onus and burden on them as per the FAA rules, which says the special VFR helicopters are to maintain visual reference to the surface and adhere to the following aircraft separation minima. So between a special VFR helicopter, which the PAT 25 was, and an arriving or departing aircraft like CRJ, it had to be minimum of a half a mile separation if the aircraft is less than 1 mile from the landing airport, which was the case. So it was the responsibility of PAT 25 captain, the instructor, to make sure that he does not close an IFR aircraft less than half a nautical mile. This is, I would take it as a disregard to the separation rule. Then there is last accurate satellite position from the NTSB of the CRJ. It's very accurate. And if you plot it on the map, you'll see that this falls outside the route 4, which means the pilots were not adhering to the authorized route. If they had followed it as shown in the dashes, which means they've gone straight, even if they were at 100 feet above the limit, helicopter would have passed below the CRJ, because at that time it would have been at 400 feet and they would have passed below it at 300 feet. And very important evidence is the calls of the ATC mentioning the weather. It says wind 320, 14 knots, gusting to 5 knots. 25 knots means 50 kilometers an hour almost. So with this gusting winds at night, helicopter pilot flying NVG would have been struggling to maintain level flight, especially altitude flown manually. And on top of it, if an emergency situation induced by the instructor for the check, then under the check ride pressure for the pilot could have been one big distraction. And not only for the pilot under test, but also by the instructor, they both would have been somewhat distracted to maintain height. Let's have a look at the exhibit, which is from Qatar EAIP, and we have been flying in this area. Here, the helicopter routes around the main airport at Hamad International is shown here. What essentially it means, both the runways or any runway has extended center line on the takeoff leg as well as on the approach side. Hamad International ATC asked the helicopter to stay at the holding point so that they do not cross extended center line if there is an aircraft on approach. So if the helicopter is coming from the seaside, it will hold over this point C till the aircraft landing has touched down the runway. Or in case the aircraft is still at 5 miles, ATC would ask the helicopter to cross full speed or expedite. But the captain of the aircraft then decides, will he be able to cross with that or gain a high speed from point C before the aircraft lands. If he decides no, he cannot, so he does not go for crossing. He says, I will hold till the aircraft lands. So it is both way. You can see the responsibility is displayed for the safety. Also, in our safety seminars and surveys and books, we find there are causes which are written for mid-air collisions. And number one is the pilot's failure to employ effective scan techniques, day or night. If they do not follow this, which is see and avoid principle, globally we know it, the responsibility of the pilot for visual whenever they are on VFR. So that's, we can see here the pilot's failure to employ. They did not, both the pilots did not, they were not looking outside. And on top of it, the second reason shown is failure to utilize extra crew for the lookout. What we normally do is we ask the crew chief to stand behind the pilots and keep looking forward, right and left, and keep clearing. And that's an extra pair of eyes for the safety. So here we find that perhaps so far with the evidence, we find that both the first one, the first and the second causes are the likely causes of this accident. But in very simple terms, if we were to say talk about it, it's PAT 25 pilots ran the traffic light without even looking outside. In fact, with their eyes closed, they just kept crossing the traffic light, and that would have led to this kind of situation. Now, the crucial question is, why such an experienced instructor let this happen? We at the bases, we know particular habits of a pilot, and I would say the answer to this query lies with the helicopter base, the squadron, and the squadron commander at the base of PAT 25. Gentlemen, with this I thank you very much, and we'll be looking forward to meet each other for some other accidents as well.